When the news broke out that Sasha Johnson had been the victim of an attack, and we didn't have any information on the race of the perpetrator, Labour MP Diana Abbott convinced herself that Sasha had been attacked by white supremacists for her politics, and shortly after the shooting, she tweeted, "Nobody should have to potentially pay with their life because they stood up for racial justice. Hashtag Black Lives Matter." It would be her first and last tweet. Not only she used the black woman's misfortune to stir up some last-minute racial division, but she also suggested that the attack was a hate crime without any evidence to back it up. Because for race pimps like Diana Abbott and the Victim League, it is not about truth. It's about protecting the narrative. When it was confirmed that the attack was not perpetrated by a white man, but by 4 black men, Diana Abbott, as well as the Victim League, played hide-and-seek until the story faded away. Unfortunately, Pookie Brutality has no value for these vultures. They cannot monetize it or use it as a political tool like police brutality. And it also contradicts the narrative because the most violent, degenerate, ruthless members of the black community are ironically the martyrs of BLM. I really believe the movie Idiocracy was a prophecy because we have reached the climax of the most retarded time in history.
I give you my word. He's gonna fix the dust on the street. I give you my word. He's gonna fix the economy. He's so smart. He's gonna do it all in one week.
The vigil for Sasha was small, smaller than her million people march, which only gathered about 400 people. The vigil was attended by about 40 people. One group was absent though, Black Lives Matter. They didn't show up because for them it was probably just a crime. This is how these people describe black on black crime. There have been no black squares, no hashtags, no mass demonstrations of civil disobedience. Even the crowdfunder that was set up to support Sasha and her family after the shooting has only just surpassed half of its modest fundraising goal of £20,000. It is better for business if the victims of Pookie Brutality are deceased, silenced, or unable to formulate a complete sentence like Sasha Johnson, because they cannot testify against the narrative. But when the victim not only survives Pookie Brutality, but speak up loud and clear about her ordeal, the Victim League tries to silence and intimidate her. This is Arabella Foss Yarborough, a single mom of 2 young boys who experienced Pookie Brutality at her house in Minneapolis when on Wednesday evening, the 30th of July, her neighbor, 20-year-old Andrew Sandberg, started shooting at her and her children through the apartment door. She was in her kitchen cooking and was alone with her 2 children when it happened. Sandberg was eventually shot dead by police snipers 6 hours later. Fortunately, the mother and her 2 children were unharmed. And we also know that Sandberg had harassed Arabella for 6 months prior to the attack. But BLM and the man's parents had the audacity to show up where Pookie Brutality took place to honor him and make lame excuses for his deadly behavior.
Technically, it was an imperfect human, as we're all imperfect humans, and he did not deserve to be picked off like an animal from a rooftop. He deserved to be able to address this with her.
And this is, ladies and gents, Pookie Brutality. Your life doesn't mean anything. Pookie has right of life and death on every one of us. And the so-called morally righteous don't have an ounce of empathy for the victims. As a matter of fact, they dismiss and despise them.
3 days! I ain't never gonna see him again! What you mean?
To check on that man! None of you guys,
Pookie is the only man who can attack someone and be seen as oppressed. It's never his fault. Poor mental health, poverty, systemic racism, and of course black women are to blame. In the UK, a total of 105 black victims of murder and manslaughter were recorded in the 12 months to March 2020, up from 96 the previous year, and the highest since the 12 months to March 2002. Black people are more likely to be victims of homicide. About 15% of all victims in the period were black, but only 3% of the general population are black. For the victims of Pookie Brutality, you only have numbers, statistics, percentage, but when a violent Pookie is killed by a white police officer, he is humanized. You see pictures of him everywhere, preferably with a child. A child that more than likely he never looked after. They have relatives talking about how good he was. He used to go to church. He had such a strong relationship with God. He looked after his children. He was Father of the Year. And he was a stellar member of society, always there to support and care for the elderly. The Victim League has turned the black community into a sanctuary for criminals, a Pookieocracy, where the most degenerate, derelict, deranged, vicious, violent, savage are put on a pedestal like they are some type of divinities. And the consequence is they are brazen and emboldened to commit more and more crime. And in response to that, the Victim League always comes up with justification on why they commit crime.
Even though all communities face gun violence, some suffer more than others. The CDC says Black people are at least 4 times more likely to be shot and killed than the overall U.S. population. They're also 12 times more likely than white people to fall victim to gun violence. In 2020, there were more than 19,000 gun homicides, with Black people accounting for 61% and white people 20%.
Our country has failed to look at this as a public health crisis.
Gregory Jackson, who's with the Community Justice Action Fund, says racial disparities and gun violence exist by design.
We can't arrest our way out of this problem. We have to figure out how we can heal folks. This is not just as simple as racism. It's more about how the root causes are impacting and oppressing individuals and the number of risk factors that exist in a said community.
Some risk factors stemming from systemic inequities and structural racism include lack of economic, housing, and educational opportunities.
Just as much as we have to acknowledge the oppression that's happened, more importantly, we have to start to dismantle it.
Basically, it's a white man's fault. The black community has a no snitching, stay on code rule that black people are supposed to abide by. The problem is, it only benefits bad people and criminals. In society, people follow a code of conduct because it is meant to keep them safe. They benefit from it. In the black community, no one is safe. It's the Hunger Games. The only difference is, Pookie has all the weapons. He has a lenient justice system on his side, and Mammy's acting as PR. Being on code in this hostile environment means protecting Pookies at all costs, being loyal to them, even at your own expense, and looking the other way when they commit crimes. The black community has a Pookie problem, a violence problem, and a culture problem. The truth is, the black culture is literally breeding Pookies. And maybe that's the reason why the community is quiet about Pookie's actions. But what the community has really taught them is that violence resolves everything. That black people can only learn and get what they want through violence. So by covering Pookie's crime, The real intention of the Victim League is to protect the culture, however effed up this culture is. The shooting of Sasha Johnson by the very man she advocated for day in and day out should be a cautionary tale for Black women. They called Sasha Johnson a queen. Sasha Johnson would have called me a coon.
You're a coon.
But when time got tough, no one was willing to save the queen. Her so-called brothers and sisters seem to have moved on, while she hasn't moved at all, since she's half paralyzed and bedridden. They have literally left her to rot in a hospital bed. The Victim League has made the most dangerous man out there the face of BLM. This is the biggest scam ever committed by race hustlers to this day, and a massive betrayal to law-abiding Black people. Sasha Johnson clearly backed the wrong horse. She could have been a strong defender of Black women's rights because she's a very motivated person and has skin in the game, by her being a domestic violence survivor. She survived Pookie Brutality, but at what cost? She has been rotting in a hospital bed for over a year now, and the man who did that to her has not been apprehended yet, and people have quickly moved on. A couple of months before the attack, Sasha did an interview with a YouTuber, and at some point, the interviewer talked about a Black man who had a very positive opinion on the police, but later ended up being killed by the same police he was defending. And what Sasha said is very interesting because some people feel the same way about her attack.
Have you seen the case of Jonathan Price here in America? Have you seen that case?
No, I haven't. I've been
Hearing about it? Well, you know, what ended up happening to this, you know, Black man is that he was killed by the police recently. Well, a few months ago, when we were starting to turn up for George Floyd over here, you know, he was one of the same Black people that was saying, what y'all doing out there? You making me sick. You're making everything about race. Then he started talking about some white folks raised him and fed him a lot of food, and he had these addiction to their, you know, these white females and all this stuff. He's talking about how great the police were, and them same police that he thought they were so great killed his behind just early this month. Now, I don't want to see nobody lose their life, but see, that's what we're dealing with out
He
here.
needed to go.
You say what?
He needed to go. He needed the same what people he worshipped, the same people he wants his merits from. They're the same people who took him out. It showed him in the end who they are. So it took him to that point to see who they are. That's why we're saying to our brothers and sisters, wake up now.
Sasha compared the police to the KKK and called for the police to be defunded in favor of youth services.
We're still asking for the police funding to be reallocated into the youth service.
And it is the same youth who ended up blowing her head off. Some people think that the government is behind Sasha Johnson's attack, based on the death threat she had received.
So one morning I got my car at like 5 a.m. I pulled up at my work, at my business, and I got out my car to a white lady who shouted, "Who the F do you think you are?" And I just remember thinking, how the heck did she find my car and know my car and so I just turned to her and I loudly stated to her, Black Power. That's who the heck I think I am. So it's about people turning up and coming around you in disguises, pretending they're someone else, and then later coming online to say, oh, I was in your shop today, or oh, I saw you today, I was the one that spoke to you today. And you know, weird things like that, down from people getting on balaclavas, getting on mopeds to attack my car, people threatening to cut my car brakes, telling me they're going to shoot me, they're going to stab me, I'm a little nigger, I should go back to my country, I'm a monkey, I'm ugly, to going on my business page and flooding it with bad ratings, pretending that they've been to my business, showing up in public to say that like they're protesting against me and the threats of violence and stuff, but I've never backed down.
The Victim League is trying to create a narrative using Sasha's very words against her. The government loves people like Sasha Johnson, BLM, Patrice True Color Scam, because their rhetoric is divisive. And that's why they could protest during lockdown while businesses were forbidden to trade. This is why they could destroy statues and riot for months. Also, Sasha Johnson merged her Take the Initiative party with the Party of Labour Pierce Corbyn, the brother of Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn.
So, are you now working with Pierce Corbyn, or are you?
Yes,
yeah?
I'm working with Pierce Corbyn to let London live and end the lockdown. Politically, yes, we're working together. Our parties have merged to work with the London Assembly coming up on May the 6th.
Enough is enough.
Taking the initiative.
Let London live.
Enough is enough.
United we stand, divided we fall.
People like Sasha Johnson need the government, and the government needs people like Sasha Johnson. Black women have always been expected to be the Dahomey Mammy soldiers of the black men. And this is not normal. As much as it is not normal for a little black girl to be at those BLM protests, marching for grown men. It is child abuse. They should be at home sheltered from adult issues. But they were put there for a reason. To acclimate themselves at an early age that the only reason they exist in the first place is for men to survive. That their only purpose in life should be to help the black men thrive. I do believe that in a sense, Sasha was a victim of this system of abuse. This grooming. We talk a lot about human trafficking. This is when your body is traded, whether it is for forced labor, sexual slavery, organ harvesting, etc. But people don't speak about emotional trafficking. When your sensitivity to injustice is weaponized against you. Race pimps will exploit your sense of community, your energy, money, time to serve their personal cause. And then they will chew you up and spit the bones out. If you look at Sasha, they took everything from her. Her beauty, her youth, her ability to be a mother to her children. They took her voice, one of her eyes, part of her skull. I mean, she is now the shadow of herself, an empty shell. And since there is nothing else they could extract from her, they moved on, looking for another young gullible black woman to vampirize. Black women, nothing is set in stone. You can opt out of this madness at any time and move on. It is an obvious advice what I'm going to give you, but every little reminders help. Put yourself first, always.
I tell her she's gonna be okay. She nodded her head at me. She squeezed my hand.